here?
Yeah, I turned you up, yeah.
Okay.
And we're live to review the episode that I call... Oh, no, I'm just going to get this right. I call this episode... Here it is. I call this episode Callback.
All back.
Callback, because that's what it's all about. We get all these references to previous stuff.
That's true. There's a lot of that.
And also, my other thought is it was slow.
Yeah, this probably would not be a good episode to introduce somebody to Homicide with.
Yeah.
Because I think it's still a good episode, but it's a good episode for people that have seen the show up to this point, not for people that are new to it.
You know what I initially thought when they were staking him out? Can you read my writing okay? Or was it just too blurry?
I thought we're really staking out a house. What?
I thought they were doing it from the inside. I thought the joke. Oh. I thought they're going to tell the guy, "Oh, we're staking out the neighbor," but really we're staking out you. But then but then I thought, hang on, that's acting too. Or you know what else I thought? Now an ENTP commander might do this, but they'd be furious with him. Is he might get them to stake it out from the other side and not tell them, thinking that they might find out incidentally. But then that wouldn't work because I think they'd throttle him.
All right, well, let me read the recap here. So
yes, let's start going off into Ben's crazy land. And then there is a good line from Pembleton later on that I've written there in red. I will reveal that later. Go on, Jeff.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Okay, so when a convicted criminal and punk is interrogated in the box, he admits to knowing of an even larger scale crime, mass murders. Pembleton is at a field where 4 bodies have already been found. G always seems to be looking nervously at the time as he is about to leave for San Francisco for his daughter's wedding. Yeah, I guess I could mention that this episode's called Stakeout, and it's teleplay by Noel Bain, story by Tom Fontana and Noel Bain, and originally aired March 15th, 1996 on NBC. Okay, the detectives take turns observing the suspected murderer's house from the Buxton residence next door, waiting for the murderer's arrival. The first of the detectives involved in the stakeout are Bayless and Howard. Bayless tells Howard that he is thinking of leaving Homicide and that these thoughts became more evident after the death. This says a death of a fruit vendor. Bayless, #1 suspect in his first case that is still unsolved. Risley Tucker was the guy's name, involving the death of the child Adina Watson.
Yeah.
Lewis arrives at the Buxton residence to give Bayless a break. The detectives witness the Buxtons get into an argument and George walks out on his wife. Russert arrives to relieve Howard and Kellerman comes to relieve Lewis. The 2 detectives spot a light go on in the suspected murderer's house and head next door to investigate. When the detectives arrive, they find a teen named Paul Hassett and bring him to the box. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Hassett admits to helping the suspected murderer find young boys for him to kill. Munch and Kellerman head to the Buxton residence and resume the stakeout on the suspected serial killer. The detectives hear the Buxtons make up after George comes back home drunk to make love to his wife. Munch also tells Kellerman that he is still the new guy in the squad and he hasn't appeared on his radar yet. With Paul Hassett leading Bayless and company to yet another field of bodies, Pembleton and G take over at the Buxton residence. Pembleton gives G a heart-to-heart talk about attending his daughter's wedding. G leaves and Bayless arrives, leaving the 2 partners in charge of the stakeout. G heads to the airport with the good intentions of attending his daughter's wedding, but he is foiled when the flight is delayed due to fog. G decides against calling his daughter to tell her that he will be late. Pembleton engages in another heart-to-heart conversation, this time with Bayless, who is still thinking of leaving Homicide. Pembleton relays the importance of the work they do as police officers after Bayless mentions that he doesn't feel like there's a family atmosphere. Pembleton says it's a real family because they put pressure on each other to become better at what they do. The detectives head next door and arrest the murder suspect who finally returned home. Bayless says he will not quit until he solves the remaining unsolved case under his name. So that's the recap. Now let's see what Mr. Morris had to say about it. In Homicide's early seasons, particularly in Season 1's Night of the Dead Living, you learn something very important about the show. Police work can be dull. It's not all car chases and gun pulling. A lot of it is dull paperwork and drudgery routine. Even when you're involved in a case to arrest a man who has committed 10 murders, there is a lot of hard, meaningless work. A prime example of this occurs in Stakeout. In the space of 24 hours, we find the identity of a serial killer from one of the thickest criminals on the show, arrested for narcotics possession and stolen property. He confesses that he was involved in 10 murders. He thinks that because he didn't actually kill any of the victims, he is less liable, which proves, as Bayless puts it, crime makes you stupid. Which, of course, he's quoting Pimbleton when he says that. The killer is en route from a trip back to Baltimore, so the homicide unit sets up a stakeout in the house next door. So 2 detectives go there, and they wait. 3 hours later, the shift changes, and they wait. Every 3 hours, they change partners until 24 hours later when the killer is arrested in his driveway without incident. During the course of that time, they identify several of the dead bodies, arrest an accomplice who agrees to testify against the killer, and build up an airtight case. So the investigation is actually the least interesting part of the show. What makes Stakeout one of the highlights of the season is the emotional baggage that some of the detectives are carrying and that they unload while they try to pass the time. Part of this is expressed very well in the characters of George and Kathy Buxton, the people on the house the detectives are using for surveillance. During the stakeout, the Buxtons argue, the husband storms out to get drunk, have sex, and return to normal. It becomes very clear that this marriage is built on a very shaky foundation and their lives are barely hanging together. Every few hours when the detectives shift, the Buxton keeps reciting and recounting previous events to tell them that what they have missed. In other words, their marriage unfolds like something on television. In a similar matter, the detectives' past unfolds before us. This is impressive because Homicide demonstrates, unlike many TV shows, that it has a long memory. The characters aren't reinvented every episode. They have a past, and some of them are still living with it. Some of the scars are minor. Kellerman is upset that he is still regarded on the shift as the new guy. Russert is bothered by her double demotion. Munch is upset that Bolander has not made any effort to make contact with his former partner since his suspension began. Others are more serious. Lewis, for example, is still aching over Grissetti killing himself 2 years ago. That his partner took his own life without even trying to ask for help pains him. G is upset because he may miss his flight to his daughter Teresa's wedding. However, it becomes clear that he is more upset about the fact that his daughter made a decision to marry a man and fly off to San Francisco without asking for his permission or his blessing. Eventually, when he finally does decide to go, he finds out the flight has been delayed by fog. It is stunning to see the pillar of the homicide unit paralyzed and afraid of what should be a joyful experience. But as is usually the case, Bayless is in the most pain. For the first time, he is talking openly about quitting homicide. Nor is this just a case of burnout, which would be understandable. As we find out, Risley Tucker, the lead suspect in the Adina Watson murder 3 years ago, has died, and Tim is trying to face the fact that this case will now forever be in red. He is tired of having to give the news to a grieving relative that someone they love is dead. He is tired of Frank's treating him like a doormat, and he is tired of having spent 3 years in the squad, but still barely knowing any of the people he works with him. Frank is disturbed by this, but as almost always the case brings him back. Homicide is like a family, not the Cleavers or the Osmonds, but a real family, opinionated, troubled, challenging each other. They speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves, and Tim is not going to find it anywhere else. This doesn't resolve all of Bayless's problems, of course, but it is enough to make him rethink leaving the squad. Stakeout is an impressive hour of television, a near-perfect mixture of the old and the new. That's funny. He says, it is ideal for introducing a new viewer to the show's charms. So he disagrees with what we said. Revisiting the great strengths and flaws of the characters and showing how Homicide can really, really sing sometimes. It remains one of my favorite episodes. My score 10. Okay, so that's what he said. What do you say, Ben?
I say an episode that's all about the internal continuity of a show is not the best episode to show to a new person. It's a continuity episode.
Right. Well, I agree with you on that.
However, one thing I want to get out of the way is there was a good line when they talked about having a baseball team, and Frank said, what's that? I don't know about you, but I don't want to see Munch run out of bunts.
Yep.
Wow. I think I'll give a little praise to the director. I think the director did the best he could to try and make this episode a little more interesting. Little things like, and I don't know if he's the one that did it, where someone goes through a door or through a doorway, he slightly cants the camera and then turns it like that. So it sort of makes it more dynamic. And I think that may have been that was in the now was it the same director in the previous episode? John McNaughton.
No. I mean, he has directed previous episodes, but not the one right before this, if that's what you're asking.
Right.
Justice Part 2 was directed by Peter Medak.
How about Part 1?
Part 1 was directed by Michael Radford.
Right.
So I can scroll back really fast and find the last one John McNaughton directed. It was Law and Disorder from season 3.
Oh, right, okay. So
that's the one about Gordon Pratt.
So it must be a common thing that's what they do is they count the camera sometimes, and then when someone goes through a door, or because when Kellerman went through the window, they turned it like that, the camera. And I mean, there's lots of clocks in here.
Yeah, Morgan kept commenting about the clocks.
Well, you don't need to be an extra. Now, I refuse to take a grab of the young man with the nose ring.
Okay.
I do not approve of white men wearing all these kind of weird rings. It doesn't go well because usually the sort of white men that wear them have a certain kind of attitude. Right. Oh, what's going on there? Here we go.
All right.
Clocks. An old school laptop. I first saw this guy, I thought, is he a drug dealer? That's what I thought. Now, Max Perlit, did he actually talk in this episode?
It's a good question. I don't think much if he did at all. Only a couple of words, maybe.
He would have been paid, I don't know how much, he would have been paid quite a bit, though. I mean, what did he get, like 10 grand for doing nothing in the episode?
I don't know how much he got.
Yeah, and residuals as well. Although he's not getting a check when we're watching it. What we got? Max Perlit, Jim True. Is that the guy with the big chin?
I don't know.
All right. Yeah. So obviously he is not an actor that stands out. Kate Walsh.
That was Mrs. Buxton. She's probably best known for her role in Grey's Anatomy now.
All right, so
I've never seen, but it's a pretty popular show.
Yeah, so she won't be poor. What about these three?
Harley McBride is a recurring
Munch's
character.
wife.
That's Dr. Dyer. Belzer's wife, not Munch's wife.
Yes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Also a former Playboy model. Say that in each episode. See if the views go up.
Is this one in the middle a relative?
Probably a distant relative, sure.
Right,
like our cousin Steve Miller, who's got his band.
Yeah, and Wojtek, because Muller and Miller's the same. We got here. Yeah, very prosperous house. That's what made me think. Oh, double income. Right, as he got. Yeah, he needs to have a shave. This guy.
Well, he's out of work. That's the traditional out of work look.
It's like always going to an interview and he never has a shave. Right. Right. Yeah, John McNaughton. Oh yeah, now I took these shots just to see how big his chin was.
All right.
Look at that thing. Look at that. He could advertise. There was one British sportsman, Jimmy Hill, who used to advertise razors in the 1960s because he had a chin like that. Wow. We got here. And we got. Oh yeah. I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
I just said Bones.
Bones. Yes, Bones. This was probably the most interesting thing. What we got here? We got Bayless. And we got the Y.
That's Kate Walsh.
Yeah. Now, what was this meant to be on the photo? I couldn't quite understand the photo. What were these items here?
It's like he's holding something in front of him.
Weird. It just looks peculiar. Right. Hopefully I don't have to cover. Right, what have we got here? Right, let's go through these. I like her blouse. I like the colour of her blouse. All right, Jess turned it off. So, okay, so right, someone's coming into the office. Right, so I'll just go through these and I'll talk about the various threads. All right, let's talk about that. So this is the thread about Lewis talking about Crossetti, who committed suicide. Well, and the reason why, folks, is that the actor was told, "Oh, you're going to get chopped. You're going to get removed from the series because we need a more telegenic character in." They said, "Okay, then, Sodja, I'm not going to record the leaving story, but just don't have me just commit suicide or something." So they just had him commit suicide, and then Felton and Bollinger. Is it Bollinger? No, Bolander. Felton and Bolander. The two actors that played those, Daniel Baldwin and Ned Beatty, they left because their 3-year contract ran out. But in the program, they're just on suspension. Right. If we look at this, we will see some older cases. And people will remember here Clayton. Remember, that's the previous episode, Damon. These are those from this episode. Looking killed. Nitsky, Nitsky may have been an episode. I'm not so sure if any of these were too recent.
You should remember Rudzinski. That was just the last episode.
Oh, right. There was Damon as well, though, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, because it was the younger Rudzinski was the one who killed Damon.
Yeah. But did we have Nietzsche one as well?
That one I don't remember.
Right. Yeah, so this is what I mean about the director, like doing these interesting angles, trying to make something more interesting. Like canted angles. And now this actress, I'm guessing she didn't go on to win a load of awards. I didn't think she was particularly convincing. Right. Right, again, Cox. Now, did this actor go on and do anything? Oh, no, you probably would have recognized his name earlier on. Yeah. Then you got this woman who... now, this makes me think of something I once heard an Indian say on a program. He says that a lot of Americans look like fish when they're talking because from their point of view they move their mouth more, and so I remember saying a lot of Americans sound like a fish opening their mouth, so she might just be one of those people that moves her mouth a lot when she talks. So it may be a truism that Americans are easier to read, to lip read, than British people and Indians speaking English. Right. Now, what is this thing here? Is this a voice stress thingy, or because if this is a recording device, then that means that by default that they aren't recording all of their interviews, and that would surprise me. Because in most cop shows they have everything recorded in the box. Right. I thought there was a well directed when when he said he did it for the money, and then like again well directed with the way G stood up, and then the camera going in. It was either like pushed in or zoomed in, probably a push in. And then we've got a cuckoo clock. No reason. Where these actual clocks are, I don't know. I mean, they're just which houses are these clocks in? That's relevant. That's a big house. Munch holding back his laughter might make this the thumbnail. Again, a canted angle. Is that something Hitchcock would do? Maybe. That would also be a good thumbnail, but this would be like small. Yeah, actually, it does show his skin up. Okay, so that would be. So I could either go with FP and well, I could go with this one. With the building, and then we've got 1996. So, folks, do we go with this one or this one? Okay, I think I might go with the cigarette one because I've already got Munch recently in another one, and we don't do racial quotas in these reviews, but we're not giving a balance. But I might go with this one because this was a little testy. Right, is there anything else to say about this? Right then. So, Kay Howard wearing a tie. Yes, that's something interesting. I believe, and I'm probably not going out on a limb here, that there's fewer and fewer people wearing ties. In fact, right at this moment, his Jeffness is probably not wearing a tie. So, what other threads have we got? Yes, we've got G and his daughter. We saw that in a previous episode where we actually got to see her. It's the old story of, oh, you're too busy with your career, you're too bothered with your family. So we get that, quite that cliche. But, it's a cliche, but it's true. So, sometimes cliches are necessary conventions of cop shows where their private lives suffer through their dedication to their job, or they're alcoholics because of their jobs and they do that to get through, and then their work life suffers, and then you get the one I like is when the detective does something wrong and it's like, I'll have your badge and your gun. That's an old one. Right. Right, so we've done FP. Yes, the stuff about Pembleton, his wife has a baby on the way, and him saying it over in the blink of an eye. Or actually, I think he said a flash of lightning rather than a blink of an eye. But yeah, those 20 years would go really quick. As a parent, in fact, we can actually ask Jeff about that, because his son will be 18 next year. We'll ask Jeff about that.
Well, just about whether it goes by fast.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Oh, that's a bit cheeky.
I think probably every parent can relate to that it feels like both sometimes. Especially, I think, in the final year. Because there's part of me that's like, man, he needs to get out of here. Tired of paying for his freeloading butt. But then another part of me, of course, is like, obviously I'm going to miss him when he's not there every day. So, and I can remember, him being a little cute kid. So
and then he became an ESTP.
Oh, he was always that. Even when he was a little cute kid.
Right, what else? Yeah, so talk about Frank.
Yeah, I would just say that
I think we've done all the threads.
I liked a lot of the dialogue in this episode. When you have a slower episode that's more dependent on the dialogue and not as much action, then obviously you have opportunity for not just rehashing of stuff that's already happened, but in kind of delving into the characters' feelings about what has happened, what's currently happening, what could happen.
I can have that at the same time. Where there was once watched this Australian play called All My Friends Are Leaving Brisbane, where the characterization was good, the dialogue was good, but I was actually bored at the same time, even though I liked those two characteristics, because maybe it's something like you may have a really good line, like say a good line every minute, but in between you're bored.
Well, it's like I said about Every Mother's Son back in season 3. It's I ranked that. I gave it a 10 out of 10. It's my second favorite episode of the entire season. Somewhat painful to watch. Like there's parts in it where it's just like you're just trying to get through it.
Is that the one with the two black female?
Yes.
The two black mothers, and then they
right, the mother of the victim and the mother of
the same room. That's
right.
a very good scene. That. Now I would use that as an introductory episode, people.
Yeah, I'm sure it has been many times. 3 Men and Adina, another example of an excruciating episode, but it's fantastic drama. This one I think is, not quite at the level of that, but I liked, even though the clocks were random, I did like the time factor and the fact that they switched out the detectives, so you had that dynamic of, different people that aren't usually partnered up talking to each other. I liked that aspect of it.
I mean, to me, the time aspect was a little bit random, and the director just trying to put a little something into it.
Yeah, and they used kind of that same technique when they did the sniper episode, because once it became known he was killing every 8 hours, then of course they were always watching the clock for the...
Yeah, but I think that was a bit more appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in this one it was more used to kind of give the audience a sense of the time passing.
Yeah.
Where the detectives are having to sit around mostly talking, just waiting for something to happen, and nothing does. So kind of like Mr. Morris was saying, they were trying to convey that sense of, the cops spend more time waiting than being involved in action stuff.
So, given what this story is, I would have expected it to be better in the dialogue. Because it's like, okay, now's the chance to talk, like to bring out these issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have thought, okay, let's get our best writer in for the dialogue, the person that best understands these characters. And the dialogue was good, but you could have made it really, really good.
Yeah, I still think that that you'll think that improves a bit in the next season when David Simon is writing more of it. Because that was a big factor in him, was trying to get realistic cop dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, he would have written down so much stuff, not only that he couldn't fit in the book, but also stuff that he realized he couldn't use.
Mm-hmm.
For security reasons, I suppose. There's nothing else I can say about this episode, Jeff.
What would your rating be?
There. You see, I have to be careful as to what mood I'm in at the time when I'm watching a program. Because while I was watching it, I was doing exercises. That doesn't mean I did pause it in between. So That usually helps me get through these episodes. But I'm like watching the screen about 95% of the time, and as you know, it takes me a while to get through an episode. What do I give it? There weren't any scenes where I was like, "Oh, this is a bad scene," or "This is a boring scene." It's just that, just like them looking at the clock. I'm like looking at this episode, and I'm like, "Oh no, I've got another half an hour left." It just seemed to drag. It didn't seem to go quickly.
So it was effective in communicating that it was dragging for the detectives too.
Yes, because it dragged for me. But you see, I don't know, but things like that could be just the mood that I was in, because when I get a little bit tired, things get a bit... But like I said, I mean, as I was watching it, but I did think, especially the way the guy played Chinny, he seemed like he was hiding something.
Didn't somebody in the episode actually say everybody's always hiding something or something to that effect?
I think maybe an earlier.
I think there was a line about that. Somebody said.
Sounds like something Frank would say.
Or everybody's got something to hide, something like that.
I think that's the kind of thing that Pemberton would have said at the end of a scene.
Yeah, either him or Munch. I think one of them said it.
Yeah,
What did you think about Munch's? Telling Kellerman you're not really on my radar screen.
Yeah, I mean, it was better. I mean, his dialogue was better than... It was almost back to season 1 quality Munch dialogue. It just needs that little... But you see, also, folks, you got to look at where an episode is in a season. Like, you're getting in this, like, third quarter of, like, a 20-episode odd season. And usually in that third quarter, the episodes dip down a bit in quality because the writers are getting a bit tired. And of course, they want to finish on a high. I don't know if you've noticed that, Jeff, like the third quarter of series.
Yeah, I have.
You know, of course, it might help if they had a shorter hiatus in the middle. Now, personally, what I would do is I would try to arrange a season in 2 blocks so that there would be a gap in the middle.
All right, so you never actually gave me a score.
You know, my default score is 7. Yeah, I'll give it about a 7.
And I will give it an 8. I enjoy it quite a bit. I like the premise. I actually find myself a little bit disappointed at the end when they catch the guy, because I almost think it would have been better if they just have to say, well, we're canceling the stakeout because we're finished because the guy's not coming back.
Oh. I also thought the guy was a little bit... He looked a bit old to be a murderer. He looked a bit old in that shape to be a murderer.
We've already had older murderers on the show.
Right.
But I thought they should have actually spent a little bit more time with certain pairings than they did. Maybe there was a little bit too much of the stuff about Bayless quitting and then the G and the daughter's wedding, and maybe not enough with the Lewis talking about Corsetti part, and maybe not of Munch and Kellerman. So I would have maybe slightly increased certain parts and decreased others.
Especially if Bayless ends up not quitting. It's going to be like, well, what was the point of that then?
Well, I mean, the point is to show the ups and downs, and that they do think about these things, that it's not just, well, we just keep going and we never think about it. You know, Bayless, from the beginning, Bayless has sort of served as kind of representing a segment of the audience, you know, in terms of it. He started out as the new guy, so he's the one who's the least comfortable with the way things operate in this environment. And he sort of serves as the conscience in a lot of cases, and sort of Frank is also in a different way. He's sort of like the flip side of the conscience.
Yeah.
You know, without delving too much into the functioning stuff, it's almost like they're the extroverted and introverted sides of the feeling, you know, in terms of what
what gets presented.
I think it's a good example of Frank is obviously the SP temperament, but there are things outside the temperament, particular issues specific to his backstory that will peak, like for instance, racial things that will go beyond the temperament, where it's like, okay, these things he's going to care particularly about, these particular things.
Right.
Just things like calling Martin Luther King, like calling it Fremont, and it's like that earlier. What are you going to call it Fremont for?
Yeah.
Little things that can annoy him.
And then Bayless will have his moments where he almost seems a bit on the NF side. I don't really think he is an NF, but he just sort of has his moment where he kind of leans that way because he's talking about, conscience and things like that,
And one of the things I think they picked up on is, because I don't think necessarily they've read like Please Understand Me 2, although it did sell 2 million copies, so some writers must have read it. Some people in TV, and they maybe told other people. And that's maybe what they noticed in real life, is that someone like Felton does tend to slightly have the edge on someone like Pembleton, all of the things being equal. That that the ISTP can get a bit of an edge on the ESFP.
Yeah, because they're, sort of less distracted by feelings, I guess.
Yeah. And so they can needle them a little bit. Whereas I suppose the ISTPs are harder to needle.
Yeah, sometimes. They got a trigger like everybody else, though.
Because I always saw that in the first season. That I always saw in those interactions. It was especially in the first episode. I think it was where Felton was just able to needle.
Yeah.
Frank.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have feelings. You have a target. It's like he doesn't have feelings. He doesn't have a target. It doesn't have that soft spot.
Yeah, they never really got to explore that later on when they showed more of Felton's feelings. You didn't have Pembleton wasn't really involved much in that part of the storyline, so didn't get his response to that really.
Right, so I don't think there's much else we can say about this episode, folks.
Okay, well, join us next time for a very interesting episode directed by Clark Johnson, who plays Lewis, called Map of the Heart. Now, if only they'd have let Gareth Thomas direct an episode of Blade 7, he wouldn't have left. If only. All right, so bye-bye, folks. Bye.